So this first deck is pretty spicy from Freddybabes. It's all about priority and tempo. So the idea of this deck is to hold priority through turn 6 and then basically use Aero to move all your opponent's cards into whatever lane they're losing, and then that would guarantee you a win. You can also use Cosmo on turn 6 and something else, maybe a Maximus, maybe a Lizard and a Zero. But through doing that, it would sort of guarantee a win. It's very similar to Goliath move decks from, what, a couple patches ago, or even current Goliath. It's pretty sweet. It can be really frustrating to play against this type of deck, because your opponent kind of just gets a guaranteed win sometimes if they're playing it really well. But it's also really fun because it's quite hard to play with. The next deck we have is a pretty janky deck from Mogwai. He's playing a junk deck. His goal here is to fill up the opponent's lane with crap, basically, through debris, green goblin, vipering over a hood, and then using that to control the game. Even Polaris has a similar thing. This was a bad matchup for Mogwai. I think he actually teched this deck to be good against Lockjaw Thanos, but it did pretty bad against this tempo deck, and he got absolutely smoked. But Freddy also played really, really well, which is why we're watching this. So just taking a look at these two hands, Freddy has Insane Hand, he has Zero Titania, which is a really great combo. It's 2 energy for 8 points of power. He also has Daredevil, which is really important for the matchup, especially just going into turn 5 against the junk deck. For Mogwai, he has a pretty good hand. He has Mojo, which is really good, and Debris, which is another key card in the deck, as well as Viper. Viper Debris is fine. Ideally, he would have drawn a Hood at this point, but it's still a pretty solid hand. So we see the first mistake of the game. I think Mogwai should have snapped on this turn. Morag is really busted for his deck. You just fill up the other 2 locations and then they can't do anything. It's really, really good, and it probably increases your win percent by like 10%. So definitely snapping here would be good. Freddy has a insane hand, but Mogwai doesn't know that. So we see some pretty insane locations flip up from Mogwai. He has 2 lockdown locations and an onslaught citadel. Freddy gets pretty lucky by putting Daredevil right. He wants to make sure he's putting Daredevil not in Onslaught Citadel in case Mogwai has the Mojo, because he doesn't want to fill it up. But it ended up being Plunder Castle, which neither player can play in, so he's just guaranteed to win that lane. The other really good thing for Freddy is he has Cosmo in hand and he has priority. And that kind of flips this entire match on its head. Because he has Cosmo, he has a guaranteed win, basically. He just plays Cosmo mid, and then Mogwai can't do anything for the rest of the game. All his on reveals are shut down, especially if he plays something turn 3, which is what he does. what's going on. Freddy's hand, opening hand, is okay. It doesn't have any of those really early cards you want to play. It has Titania, but it doesn't have the combo with Zero. It has the Cosmo, which absolutely wrecks this junk deck, and it has a Maximus, which is just a good stat stick on turn 3, but he doesn't have anything to play early, so it's actually a little weak. Mogwai's hand, on the other hand, is actually pretty solid given the locations that flipped. He has Green Goblin, which is good into Sewer System. He has Viper and Debris, which are also really strong. Mogwai got a little unlucky with the coin flip of who has priority. He could have also tried to take it with a Carnage, but he probably wants to save that for the Debris. But if he did play out Carnage, it would have had him take priority, and that would have guaranteed he can't get one of his cards sniped by a turn 3 Cosmo. Otherwise, I probably would have snapped in Mogwai's position. The matchup is bad, but knowing that your opponent's tempo deck doesn't have anything on the board by turn 3 is really good. So Freddy has a pretty good turn 4. He can just play Daredevil. He chooses not to play Yellow Jacket into the Luchikio lane, which is a little weird, but A, he's going up against a junk deck, so keeping his board clear is pretty good. And then B, he only really needs priority for turn 6 at this point, in case he draws an Aero. And then lastly, playing in Luchikio sucks because you get rocks. So it's turn 5, and Freddy just saw what his opponent's going to play using Daredevil. And importantly, he sees Mogwai play out all his cheap cards. He sees him play his only 1-drop in the deck, and he knows that Mogwai has 2 5-drops. So he knows that if Mogwai plays a 5-drop on turn 6, that's the only card he can play. So if Mogwai's plan is that, he can only really use it to win 1 location. Importantly, normally you want to use Daredevil as a way to guarantee you get priority for turn 6 for your Aero. But at this point, Freddy hasn't drawn it, and he only has a 1 in 4 chance of getting it next turn. It's really hard to decide if you should snap here. You know you're probably going to win, but snapping when you Daredevil is a good way to have your opponent retreat. So coming into turn 6, Freddy knows the best possible play Mogwai can make is probably slam a Spider-Woman to win left. He has a bunch of really cheap and powerful cards in hand, so he can just spread out power. Importantly, he knows he can probably take Titania, because if Mogwai plays there, then he'll just win the other 2 locations. So this round really shows how weird this matchup is, and just how good Daredevil is also against the junk deck. And poor Mogwai never drawing his Daredevil. But yeah, Freddy didn't play anything turn 1 and 2 in his tempo priority deck, and 2 of the 3 locations are pretty good for Mogwai, being locations Freddy doesn't want to play into for the sewer system, and Luchagia, which would normally mean he just junks up the other location and wins one of the other 2. But that doesn't happen here because Freddy doesn't play anything early, and then Daredevil on turn 5 lets Freddy know that Mogwai probably only has 1 card to play on 6, and then he just goes from there. Round 3, turn 1. Both players have pretty good hands. Mogwai has Hood into Viper, and Freddy got Coulson off of the camp, which is pretty good. It's a decent body, and it can give him just a 4-drop to play. He also has Daredevil and Aero in hand. Both are really key cards in this match. So turn 2 is actually really important for this game. Freddy knows he needs to beat a 7 power to seize priority for turn 3, and then turn 3 he has his Cosmo, so he can hope to snipe either a Goblin or a Debris. And he has exactly enough, thanks to Wakandan Embassy, where he can play out his Daredevil and his Yellow Jacket for 8 power, which will beat Mogwai's best play here for priority, which is Viper for 7. So turn 3 is another interesting round on where to slam down Cosmo. So he knows if his opponent has players or Green Goblin, Mogwai will want to play it mid to try and clog that up, since he already has 2 slots filled. He also has Killmonger in hand, which deals with Debris. So the best spot for him to put it is mid. This is a pretty funny turn also, with Mogwai just pulling off the sickest Killmonger snipe of the game. Which is kind of a play that Mogwai was forced into. He wants to play Gamora on turn 5 just because it's a lot of points. And this will be the only time he can play out his Demon and Debris, so he kind of just has to hope, hey, maybe Freddy doesn't have the Killmonger. So, turn 5 is probably where we see Mogwai make the single greatest play of the entire game. It is such a sick fake out. So Freddy has Daredevil, so he knows what he's gonna do. He slams Gamora in the Cosmo lane to make it look like he's holding a Shang-Chi in hand when he doesn't have one. This means this will bait Freddy into playing Aero, so that way he can Shang the Gamora, but the Shang isn't there. So we had a pretty good play from Mogwai on turn 2 from the Pegasus. He has Spider-Woman and Gamora in hand. He's playing Gamora right on purpose so it doesn't get the buff and avoids a Shang. And saving the Spider-Woman for later. Unfortunately, it is turn 3 and Freddy has priority with a Cosmo, which shuts out most of Mogwai's best plays. He has a choice also where to play the Cosmo. He can play it Bar Sinister, and that means if Mogwai plays a Goblin there, he just automatically loses the game. Or he can play it mid to protect his Red Skull, which is the slightly safer play. That's the only real scary thing Mogwai could have. And even still, there's always the looming threat of Cosmo going there, so he might not make it the play anyway. So we see what looks like the first mistake from Freddybabes. He chooses to play out Lizard on turn 5, when he really needs to play 2 cards out on turn 6 to contest Icebox and Bar Sinister. So he could have gone Shang on 5, Lizard, and then hope to draw something cheap enough to play, which he gets in Killmonger. Important to note, Killmonger will not win him mid. He goes down 5, and then Mogwai would go down 6 from Mojo losing the buff, and he'd be down by 1. So we see a weird play from Freddy. He ends up playing Daredevil instead of Lizard on 2. This is weird because he has Cosmo in hand, and Cosmo is extremely good on 3 when you have priority against this deck. because it can just screw up whatever 3 Mogwai plays. But I think he's doing this because he is giving Mogwai a lot of respect, and thinks it's pretty telegraphed where he'll play Cosmo. And the reason it's telegraphed is because he doesn't want to play Cosmo mid, because 1-drops can't be played there, so that would just shut off. His hood already can't be played there. The only location hood can be played is right. So if he lands a Cosmo right, that just means Mogwai can't play the hood anymore, which is what ends up happening. But the negative of this play is he can't try and snipe a 3-drop with his Cosmo. Nothing too interesting in the last turn of the game. Freddy has his Killmonger, and he already drew Daredevil, while Mogwai didn't. On the last turn, he has Killmonger Titania, and he's winning the other 2 lanes. He can guarantee a win in the mid lane by playing Killmonger and Titania, shutting down Mojo and wiping out 5 points from Mogwai. Mogwai also has a really good turn 6. It just doesn't beat Killmonger Titania. Really sweet match between Freddybabes and Megamogwai. Both played really well. The odds were definitely against Mogwai this game, which sort of just adds to the comedy of the match. But they both played great. Mogwai had one of the sickest plays I've ever seen, just with the insane fake out. And Freddy just had back-to-back sick either Cosmo or Killmonger snipes. And if you haven't yet, I'd definitely try out a deck like Freddy is playing. They're just really fun. He has some more decks like that on his channel, so you can sort of get a feel for how you're supposed to play them. Yeah, other than that, this also just goes to show how powerful Daredevil is. We don't see him as much as we used to. He used to be a complete menace. And it's kind of weird that he went away, at least a little. Even though he's bugged right now, he's still just really good.